Good afternoon. Welcome to the last band of the A&E IndieFilms Speakeasy. I want to say thank you to Junior Johnson's Midnight Moon for providing the moonshine. Thank you. And the Mad Popper for the popcorn. And most especially to Molly Thompson of A&E IndieFilms for sponsoring this venue for the last several years. Thank you. And one last shout out to Velasquez Media. Thank you, ladies. This is live streamed. Thank you. I'm going to quickly hand this over to Liz Ogilvie. Liz Ogilvie is now with Fandor, but she was with Crowdstarter for a long time. And everybody up here is really excited, and they have their own moonshine. So I have said the gauntlet is thrown. The last band of the Speakeasy is usually the most wild, so we're calling this the Funding Panel. So I will let them have it.
Deirdre, thank you so much, and I am delighted to be here, and I feel an honor of moonshine. I'm leaning in, so if I lean over halfway through the panel later and I fall over, I apologize in advance. So cheers, everyone.
Cheers. I'm sorry, I have to point out, I work for the federal government. For the record, I am drinking water, everyone.
All right. We'll see how that goes in 30 minutes. Anyway, well, thanks everybody so much for coming this afternoon. I know there's lots of fantastic movies, and for you to show up here is quite an honor. And yes, I'm Liz Ogilvie. I'm from Fandor. It's a video-on-demand streaming site based in San Francisco. And there's buttons kicking around the little penguin, so feel free to grab one and wear it proudly. But I am so excited to be moderating this panel today because there's nothing better when you have people sitting to my left that have money to give filmmakers. Woohoo! So the Speakeasy is called Shows the Money, and there's some cackling out the back there. Hopefully that was because they're drinking the moonshine. But our amazing panelists today, we've got Ryan, Lisa, Chrissy, and Kristen. All coming from sort of different walks of funding and crowdfunding and funds and all this fun stuff. So the goal of today is really just to sort of really dig deep and figure out the application process, really great tips that you guys are looking for, all the fun, interesting tips and tools that really will help you seek funding as you venture into your projects. But I just want to get a sense from the room, how many people in the audience are filmmakers? How many people in the room have actually put their film on a crowdfunding platform? We were leaning to the left side of the room here. How many people have submitted to filled out a grant application form? Okay, quite a few. Great. For our panelists here to the left, I want to get the scoop from sort of the creative and financial aspects of all their programs. So I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to start with you, Ryan, and we can work through to Chrissy. If you can just sort of explain, your role, the programs that you're working on, and generally the sort of submission process.
Sure. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ryan Harrington. I am the Vice President of Artist Programs for the Tribeca Film Institute. TFI is the nonprofit affiliate organization to the festival, and I oversee all of our filmmaker programs, which are year-round, not just during the festival. Overall, we fund about over $2 million through feature documentary, narrative, and nonfiction cross-platform storytelling. So we fund about 50 docs a year, about 10 narrative, and 4 to 8 cross-platform works. What we're looking for mainly, and I kind of repeat Molly Thompson from A&E all the time. What we look to fund is good movies that just happen to be documentaries. I think looking at the films that we have at this festival here, it's a really good, you get a good idea of what we do. We had the opening night film, 112 Weddings, the closing night film, actually, to The Battered Bastards of Baseball, and then E-Team, The Great Invisible, which just screened. So we are funding all types of films that are story-driven and character-led. We have 2 calls a year, 2 cycles. One is in the fall and one is in the winter. Everything is free. It's via our website, tribecafilminstitute.org. In addition to just writing checks, which is a very small part of what we do, we lead workshops around the world, mainly in Latin America and the United States. And we host labs and panels. And when we write you a check, we're actually giving you mentorship and guidance and helping you connect the dots that you need to get your film finished.
Okay, great. Thanks. Right. Do you do shorts as well, or is it all feature?
We do shorts, but we don't have an open call for them, so we commission shorts through a couple of our programs, mainly with Gucci for this women's initiative called Time for Change.
Okay, great. And Kristen, she's a great addition to our panel because she is from Indiegogo, which is a crowdfunding platform. And obviously this is a little bit different from everybody else that's on the panel, but again, very, very important for filmmakers, certainly in the stage of the filmmaking process. So Kristen, if you want to just talk about kind of, what you do and, if people are coming to put their projects up on Indiegogo, what's the sort of process?
Sure. My name's Kristen Konvitz. I'm the manager of the film vertical at Indiegogo based out of New York. We are a global and open platform, so anyone who wants to crowdfund a project, creative, nonprofit, or entrepreneurial, can fund that project on Indiegogo. We are particularly interested in documentaries because we feel that documentarians know how to engage their audience and know their audience very well, so they usually do very well on the site. In terms of submission process, we are totally open, so if you want to crowd something, we don't want to stop you, so you are welcome to do it, and my job is to basically help you through that process. So helping you through ramping up your campaign for 6 weeks to 2 months before you launch, and then ultimately throughout the entire campaign, building your page, helping you with social media, reaching out to press, et cetera, doing outreach. And eventually in the post of your campaign, we can help with fulfillment and getting self-distribution, et cetera.
So it's sort of soup to nuts.
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
A to Z.
A to Z, okay. And we can dive in a little bit more on kind of what that support is, because I think it's really important for people to understand or be aware of the digital tools that Indiegogo has to offer, because not everybody is very digitally savvy, and it's just sort of, again, certain things that you guys need to think about when if you decide to go down this road. So great, we'll talk about that after. So Lisa, tell us about Catapult.
So hi, I'm Lisa Chanoff, and co-founder along with Bonnie Cohen of Catapult Film Fund, and we do grants for documentaries, and we focus on the early stage of the process. We do development grants, and our purpose is to help with that. It doesn't have to be the first money, but we're happy to be the first money in, and to help you do some initial shooting or some initial editing, and put together what you need to show to then get your further funding. So we love to come in early, and we do have 2 grant cycles a year. We have through an application process. The grants are up to $20,000, and we fund about 7 or so per cycle. And when we come in with the grant, and then we are there for strategy and advice and help. We're happy to look at footage, but that's something that's done sort of on a per case basis, basically as much as the filmmaker wants to engage us. And we also are really interested in helping the film along as much as possible to get to the end stage. So we will come in, help connect you with other funders, come along with some like a booster grant if needed, if there's a snag along the way. So we do want to stay and really help all through the process.
That's great to know that the booster bump
sometimes
might be the way to go. Yeah. Maybe I should take another sip of my moonshine right now. But anyway, sorry, Chrissy. You can from the. Thank you very much. Going on to the government grants, Chrissy, take it away.
My name is Chrissy Cortina, and I'm what we call a senior program officer in the Division of Public Programs at the National Endowment for the Humanities. So the NEH, which is a government agency, it is taxpayer funded. I think that's important to kind of remember when you think about the kinds of films that we support. We have a group in public programs of about 8 senior program officers. Some of them, I'm a historian. I actually taught college-level history for almost a decade, and so I have specialties in race relations, 20th century, women's history, African American history. I'm saying this because our program officers, we have art historians, we have some filmmakers, former filmmakers and funders on our staff. And one of the things we do is we do offer a lot of support to filmmakers, I think. So we have 2 program deadlines. We fund only documentary films. And so that's kind of the first thing, only documentary films. So we are primarily interested in content. Our mandate at the Endowment is to use public funds to educate the public. Now, this education can take many forms in terms of topics, but really, we want to kind of engage audiences and engage a broad public. So we think a lot about audience. We fund at both the development stage up to $75,000 in development funds. You can choose then, if you wish, to apply for production funds. That's up to about $450,000. It is not required. You could just jump over development and come to us for production. That's fine as well. And then we also have a third deadline in June. It's coming up, and that's called Bridging Cultures Through Film. That's an effort. I think a lot of people tend to think that the NEH funds only U.S. and especially U.S. history topics, but Bridging Cultures Through Film was designed to actually broaden that. So that's if you have a project that somehow deals with another culture. And we actually, the language on that is pretty open-ended, and we've seen some pretty imaginative ways of negotiating that. But the key is either members of your media team, or we require that you have some scholarly advisors. Some of those people have to be non-US, working somewhere outside the US. So that's kind of a lowdown on
Yeah, no, that's great. Lots of great information there. And Kristen, I'm going to throw a question to you before I ask my next question. But there's a couple of other crowdfunding platforms that are out there, and I'm just curious,
Really?
What makes Indiegogo different? And can you maybe just talk about, because I think that has an impact on the films that are put up there, but if you can just talk a little bit about what makes you different.
Yeah, from a filmmaker standpoint, I think the elements that filmmakers most respond to is that we offer flexible funding. So you get to keep whatever you raise, even if you do not hit your goal. In my opinion, most filmmakers know how to work within whatever budget they can get to, especially independent filmmakers. So why would you spend 40 days working toward a campaign where you get no benefit whatsoever? The other element is that we're global. We're in 190 plus countries. A third of our contributions actually come from international countries. Other than that, we allow filmmakers to tie in their projects with a nonprofit. So your contributors can actually receive a tax deduction, and you get a reduced fee on Indiegogo.
So how does that, we were talking earlier about your fiscal sponsor. Mm-hmm. How does that tie in, or is it similar? Can you maybe talk a little bit about that?
Yeah.
And I'll just open that up to the panel as well, if you can talk a little bit about how you work with fiscal sponsors and how filmmakers can work with fiscal sponsors, because I think that's important.
So we're building what we call an ecosystem, which is we have multiple partnerships with fiscal sponsors and nonprofit organizations. So you can tie in your film with one of those organizations, and basically it's seen as like a mutually beneficial relationship. They promote you, you promote their platform, we promote both. With that, you are getting severely reduced fees on the crowdfunding site and also through their fiscal sponsorship. And then they also provide the tax deduction. So it funnels actually through the fiscal sponsorship or nonprofit first, and then to the filmmaker.
Ryan, how does it work with you with fiscal sponsorship?
Well, actually, I think the TFI is actually, we're quite lucky that essentially if you are getting a grant from us, we can write a grant directly to whomever you would like us to. So more often than not, we are writing checks to fiscal sponsors for the tax benefits. However, we do write checks to individuals and LLCs and production companies and other nonprofits as well.
And Lisa, how does that work with you?
Yeah, so you actually do have to have a fiscal sponsor to get a grant from us, but you do not have to have that set up when you apply. So some people do, some people don't. That is a neutral factor for us in our consideration. It's just that if you were chosen for a grant, then you'd have to then set up a fiscal sponsor to receive the grant.
Chrissy?
And for us, we require that you come in with a fiscal sponsor, a nonprofit, because we are actually prohibited from giving a grant to a for-profit, say a production company or an individual.
Okay, so we know what these guys are doing. We know their programs. You've submitted your film. It's in amongst the many hundreds, thousands. Maybe you can give me a number. Maybe you can. But then, so what is the process? So when the deadline is closed, what do you then do? And just if you could maybe just talk about the process and the nitty-gritties of kind of what you do to get to that final stage where you award a grant. Ryan Harrington.
I drink a lot usually. I lock myself in a dark room and watch links on my computer now. It's so funny. I was thinking the other day how different it's become. I just remember when our cycles used to close, and I would stay in the office until 2 a.m. opening envelopes and folders and numbers, and now it's just so much easier. Anyway, I digress. We get about 2,000 submissions a year.
And that's across all your programs?
And that's across all of the programs, generally. And we've, like I said, docs, we fund 45 to 50 a year. So it is such a competitive process. So we have a number of outside reviewers. Everything is done online with us, and we pay a number of industry professionals. Liz Ogilvie was one of those at one point.
Love it.
To review the films. Everything that comes through our doors are looked at by at least 3 people, and then we, as a staff, whittle things down. Some of our programs are tied to external panels, so we have people that are outside of our organization making final selections for us. But a number of our programs, we as a team internally are making those decisions. So I think it just depends. Like I said, we have 9 programs, so all of them work just a little bit differently. But generally, my team is whittling down the submissions to a finalist pool, and then those decisions are either made by an outside or inside team of people.
Okay. Yes. And so, Lisa, what's your process?
So we get, let's say, about 450 maybe applications per cycle. We've been doing this for 4 years, and so the numbers are changing each time. But that might be around the number that it stays at. So we have. I think we hope that it's not too onerous of an application, and we really are just focusing on what's the story and how you're going to tell it, and that's the crux of the question, and who are your characters, and those are the most important parts. We do have readers who take a look at the applications, and but we're all we're a small organization, and so we're all kind of involved with the process. We are looking. Many times there's really nothing to show for the project people are applying for, so we're really focused in all cases, and particularly in those on the prior work. So that's probably most often what we're looking at is people's prior work, and then whatever you might have to show for the project. And we do say, but a lot of times it's something we say, feel free to submit something if you do have it, with whatever caveats you might want to put on. So because likely that's the case. So then, so I can talk more about the criteria and such, but that's basically the process is pretty straightforward. We're looking through, and we're just making sure it's the right stage, the right, what we're looking for, and looking for. We're kind of for an eclectic slate of films each time. So we do sort of put together a eclectic group.
And actually, Chrissy, before you answer that, we were just talking in a group a little bit before about the application process in of itself, because, Chrissy, I know that your paperwork's, you need to do your homework pretty much before you start filling in the application form. But again, it's an important process. So if you can maybe just talk about once somebody actually goes through that process, what then do you do once they've hit the deadline date?
Well, first I would recommend that because our process is fairly lengthy and fairly substantive, we ask for a lot of information. We ask for a lot of detail. We do ask for samples of previous work at the production stage, a distribution plan, kind of all of that. So I often recommend that if you're thinking about maybe applying, you call or contact our office. And one of the things that I do is I answer my phone and people will say, so, do you think this is a kind of project that you might fund? I can actually help you with that. And, because we do have fairly specific guidelines and regulations for what we can and cannot fund. So I recommend that because it is an enormous investment of time, and I don't want to mislead anyone. That said, once you submit at one of our deadlines, and we have deadlines at January and August, we don't vet. So once it's in, if you have all of the pieces, if you come in with a nonprofit, all of that, then immediately we start sorting all the proposals, and we probably see about 100, maybe 125 per cycle. We will sort them into panels, usually by maybe broad subjects, and then every proposal gets reviewed by 5 reviewers. And so those people, for documentary film, there are always 2 reviewers who are working documentary filmmakers. Then there are 3 content specialists, again, usually academics, anthropologists, sociologists, historians. They do online review. We have criteria that we ask that they comment upon: content, audience appeal, sort of all of that. And then they come to DC for a day, and right now we're in the middle of panel meetings from projects submitted for January, and we literally talk for an entire day. And those 5 people in that room have their written comments, and then they discuss each and every proposal. And so I think the benefit of it's a long process, it's labor intensive, but whether you get funded from us or not, you will get both written comments from our reviewers. Their names have been taken off, but you'll get written comments, and then you'll also have sort of additional kind of oral comment notes. And again, we do encourage often people to resubmit. As a program officer, again, I can work with you. I can actually tell you what I heard at the panel meeting, and I can give you advice for resubmitting.
Yeah. And Chrissy, that's great to know that you actually make the effort and give feedback, because I think that's, I mean, funding is obviously a little different from film festivals, but when you submit to a film festival, you don't know why your film's necessarily, not being accepted. So to actually have somebody at the other end of a phone that you can actually have a conversation with is hugely important, because think of the value and the feedback that you can get. So the hotline to Chrissy, we'll give the telephone number out shortly, but presumably all the information will be.
And that's my job. I always think, so this is what I'm in for. But to me, it's really exciting. And I'll just say one more thing, which is that I can, or any of our other program officers, we can actually advise you, talk to you. I read drafts. We're one of the few agencies, groups. I can read drafts. I could actually recommend scholars. I can sort of give you a general sense. I feel like my job at that stage is to actually kind of sort of preempt the questions that I think our evaluators might have. Once you submit, though, again, legally, I can't initiate any contact with you. So I always tell people sometimes right before the deadline, I'm sorry, I can't, if you call me, I'll say, how's the weather? But, I can't say anything about, but then once the decisions are made public, again, whether your film is funded or not, then we can get back to work.
Okay, good to know. So all bets are off once it's submitted, and you're like, no, not talking to you. Okay.
And some people call me and they try. I know
sneaky.
when they're trying to sort of, they're fishing. Yeah. So have the committees started meeting? And I'll say, oh my gosh, I've got a meeting. I've got to go.
Right, okay, well, good. So she's not being rude. It's just the rules, okay? And actually, again, the process. One of the things, and Ryan had sort of mentioned the fact that I have been on quite a lot of these panels before. I was on ITVS as well, and I'm just going to throw out. And actually, Kristen, you can talk about this because it sort of speaks to materials as well, and the types of things that people are submitting, i.e., synopsis. So written treatment and a clip. And I'm just going to sort of, discrepancy. What's the biggest pet peeve that you guys have when somebody submitted a written treatment? Lisa. And you can just be honest because it's a closed room. We're not being streamed online. Anything, but just again, thinking of tips. If you're somebody submitting a written proposal, what is it that just bugs you, or what's the eye roller?
Well, okay, I'll put it more positively. That what could be really helpful is, and one little thing because we're right in the middle of a review right now, and one thing that's a small point, but really from the very first description of the project, be describing it in an interesting way. So even your summary, project summary, should be, oh, this is a movie. This is I'm describing an interesting movie. That really gets us in there. And then, I think that one of the things is that sometimes people will describe a very interesting situation or a really interesting premise, but what really makes it a strong proposal is okay, there's this cool premise, and this is what we're going to do with it. This is what we're going to be following, or this is the narrative. And you may not even know the narrative exactly at that time, but you have a reason why you think it's an interesting thing to follow. So let us know what that is. So, and certainly one of the things, like if it's just an issue in search of a story, we'll really want to know what the story is going to be. So I'd say that's a tip. One other thing is that since you probably you may not have footage for it, if it's a film, a project that really focuses on like one character, two central characters, if you can give us any indication of those characters, even if you haven't shot anything. So for example, if there's someone that's somewhat well known, give us a YouTube clip. Just because I'll end up trying to Google and see, what does this person look like, what they're like when they're talking, because that'll be so key to know if it's if we're going to be watching a film where that person is featured. So that's actually a pretty little tip, and it's pretty easy to do, but
well, that's such a great tip, because definitely you alluded to the fact that you probably don't have any footage, depending on the process. So to actually share that character, and it will definitely support your written treatment. Ryan, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think Lisa did touch on this. My biggest pet peeve, I think, when looking at treatments is when a filmmaker tries to tell me why I should care about the subject matter or the issue in the film. I always kind of recommend filmmakers focus on the story and tell the story of your film and the treatment. And it's just a really good exercise as a filmmaker. As Lisa said, you might not know what's going to happen in the film, but if it's an exercise, write down your 3 acts and how you envision all of these stories playing out, because documentary film is creative storytelling. And we want to see your work and your hand as a filmmaker in your treatment. In terms of the footage, we ask, while we do development funding, we generally ask for 7 minutes of footage from the project you're applying with, at least 7 minutes. So I think what I can recommend in terms of footage is sometimes filmmakers will send 3 hours of a very, very rough cut of the film. Never, ever, ever do that. You know, this is your one chance to get us to take notice of your project. And if we're just asking for a minimum of 7 minutes, this is your opportunity to put your best foot forward and send in your juiciest, kind of your A-like footage that gives us a sense of how great these characters are, how unique the story is, how unique your access is, and it also can allow us to want more of it. So.
Also, I would think the production value is important
absolutely.
too, because you don't want to just send in something that looks awful. And trust me, I've seen many clips that you're thinking, wow, this if the filmmaker had taken just a little bit more time to clean it up a little bit, just so you can get a sense of the creativity and also the filmmaking style, and the fact that you can actually shoot, or you're working with somebody who's a great shooter, that goes a long, long way as well. Thought I'd just throw that in there. And then with regard to Kristen, obviously, you know, people are putting up information. Do you vet what goes up there? Is there a process?
We do not vet.
Okay.
I mean, as long as you're not putting porn up, you can pretty much crowdfund anything you want. We believe that if anybody has a passion they want to crowdfund, they should be able to do it. The one thing I would say that is the most important aspect of a campaign is not the pitch text, because we find that most people don't even read it. It's the pitch video. So this is the most important part of any campaign. It's what's going to sell your film in 1 to 3 minutes, sell yourself, sell your concept, sell everything about your movie. And production value is definitely key. I mean, this is what you're going to engage people with this video. So that's the most important part, is to make that engaging and well done, and get your who, what, where, when, why about your film across.
And on the Indiegogo site, I know there is a section that has a lot of detail on, you know, what would make a really great campaign. Can you talk a little bit about that, and any tips that you can give the filmmakers about paying attention to that?
Yeah. So, we realize that crowdfunding is becoming pretty ubiquitous and happening increasingly more so as the years go by. So we find that how do we help filmmakers to stand out and make sure that their campaign is, you know, going to get attention? So what we've been doing over the last year is we built this film division, which didn't exist a year ago, where basically we're helping filmmakers through the entire process, as I mentioned, A to Z. Should you want our help, we can provide it. You can pick up the phone and call me.
Another phone number, folks.
You can email me as well.
Email.
That's preferred. And we're working on basically simplifying resources so that it's, you know, very easy to use. 1, 2, 3, here's how you do it. You input it into the site. If you have any issues, you can call me. But basically, we're building these film resources. So we have a film guide that basically you can go on the site and download. It's a very, you know, streamlined guide on how you set up a crowdfunding campaign and all the aspects of it, including social media and press, and how to, you know, build in the weeks leading up to it. And beyond that, we're building this ecosystem of partners, like the Fiscal sponsorships and self-distribution partners and fulfillment partners that can help you at those other steps other than just a crowdfunding site.
Okay, that's really cool. I just want to sort of step away just from the sort of very practical questions, and, you know, just think about funding documentary films as a whole, and how the American film funding is sort of perceived. And Ryan, I know that you're traveling all the time internationally, and you talked about a couple of panels that you do abroad, but I want to get a sense, when you're sort of, do you fund international projects?
Yeah, we do.
And can you maybe describe sort of the perception of when you go, say, to Europe, because obviously our Europeans, you know, what can I say, you know, tend to sort of appreciate their artists maybe a little bit more. Certainly in Europe, there's, you know, the artists actually get money and all the rest of it. So I just talk a little bit about your experience when they're not throwing things at you, but just, you know, talk a little bit about that.
Well, no, I think the I think the ecosystem for sustainability in terms of filmmaking careers is just so much. Filmmakers are so much more supported internationally, especially in Europe. You know, there's so much government funding. The institutes are strong there. They have producer training networks. They have filmmaker. You know, there is an ecosystem that exists to support filmmakers' careers. I think you kind of look at the budgets. And our films, you know, their films look as nice as ours do, but their budgets are very different, and their filmmakers are getting getting paid to make their films, and you know, they're not having to kind of apply for my pot of money, even though they do, and Lisa's pot of money. You know, they're getting supported in a very large way that I wish our filmmakers in the U.S. would be supported.
And that sort of is a sort of perfect segue into my next question, because you can apply to everybody, or you can do everybody's. You can apply to every grant, every fund. You can do your crowdfunding at different times. So it's something to think about, that you know, you can't, you just have to really sort of read all the information, pay attention to the type of film you want to submit, and you know, really sort of, you know, look at who's up here that can perhaps have some money to give you for your film. I also want to just sort of talk about sort of little case studies, and just sort of as far as like what films that you've funded or you've taken a little bit of a risk, or there was a certain film that maybe there was a little bit of argy-bargy going in that room, you know, for the process. But I know you probably can't make that out. But
what did you say?
Argy-bargy. It's a Scottish
I think we
word.
need a definition.
Meaning like
on
you're
that.
duking it out. But you know, but see, joking apart, you know, the you know, just talk a little bit about certain projects that you sort of really had a passion for, that and you can maybe talk about some ideas or the process that you went through to sort of fund those.
Me?
And I keep looking at you, and I'm sorry because Ryan's to my left.
Well,
I'm going to look at you, Chrissy, at the end.
Well, I should say that, you know, the way that, you know, we often work with each other, and you know, most of the films that I'm funding have gotten support from Indiegogo or some of the other platforms. And you know, Lisa in what she does at Catapult is amazing, because filmmakers can go to her without any footage. If they're lucky enough to get a grant from her, they create a trailer or a reel, which they then send to me, and I can give them funding. So we collaborate a lot on projects like that, and it's just, you have to be very strategic about who you apply to when, and that you know, there is a little bit of a science to kind of how we kind of operate together.
Well, that's good to know.
But there is a film, the closing night film here, Battered Bastards of Baseball, I think is a really great example of what we do at TFI and how we can help filmmakers outside of just writing a check, like I said. These were first-time filmmakers that applied to us last year. I had never heard of them before. They were fresh out of school, and they sent in this incredible short series of scenes of this amazing archive, which was just really spoke to everyone that looked at it. And he had these amazing interviews with Kurt Russell and Todd Field, and it really spoke to everyone that looked at it. But I was really worried, because it's impossible to get this baseball archive and not pay so much money for it. So I called them and asked them to send me the documentation that they had it, and they did. And then they came to Tribeca last year, and we set them up on one-on-one meetings and got a producer for them, and then helped them through the edit process and put a supervising editor on the film. And the film went to, like, you know, it was like the talk of Sundance, and is now here, and it's going to, you know, be seen widely around the country by the end of the year, which is just so exciting.
So I haven't seen the film. So is that mainly archival footage?
Yeah,
that's in there,
it's the story of the first publicly owned baseball team in the early 1970s, which was owned. Bing Russell was the manager of that team, who is Kurt Russell's father, and it's really this kind of American story of how this one team touched this entire sport and Americana. A lot of the things that we don't really realize came out of this one team of ragtag old guys.
And that actually brings a good point. In thinking about the type of footage that you're wanting to use within the film. You mentioned that a lot of the sort of the baseball footage can be really, really expensive. So again, you know, think about what you're submitting when you're actually sending in these applications, because you never know what the hurdle might be. So Lisa, is there any sort of stars in the films that you've sort of funded that you're maybe a little hesitant about, but then that sort of you gave your grant? And
Yeah, well, I'd say that, you know, we each time, I would say before, we have sort of an eclectic slate each time of films that we fund per cycle, and you know, it's often there are films that are, you know, we get some really seasoned filmmakers and some, you know, really new filmmakers. I'd say probably the most are the sort of people who are like early mid career that have a couple films, but so, and then sometimes there are projects that you know that the film is wonderful, but it's going to have a little bit of a hard time out there getting funding. And those, we like, so that's has a particular place in our heart because, we are really interested in all sorts of projects, even if they're really, quiet films or films you wouldn't say, oh, this is a film about X issue or Y issue. It might be a fantastic story that reveals, 5 different issues, including, just about life in general, the human condition. And so sometimes those we do. They're more risky because we know they're might have a harder time getting funding, but we love to take that on. So so I would say that one project that comes to mind is a project that's called The Last Season. It's about Matsutsuki mushroom foragers in the the Oregon forest, and she happens to be a new filmmaker, although that's not generally who we would fund. All she had was photographs of the area, but they were very beautiful, and this story about sort of a Vietnam vet and a Cambodian refugee who find a connection in this sort of off the grid. So that was a film that we really loved. Was unusual, and we came in, and then we did come in. She desperately needed to get some of some translations of some. She couldn't continue editing without knowing what people were saying, basically. So we helped there, and looked a lot of footage, and that's one where we did get pretty involved. So that one is just sort of a little. It's a different film. But it's going to be premiering at the San Francisco Film Festival.
Oh, great. And what's the name of it?
It's called The Last Season.
The Last Season, okay.
We funded it after you got that ready.
Yeah, that's right.
That's great. And Chrissy, there was any standouts for you that...
Well, I'm trying to think. I mean, I just came from a showing of Freedom Summer, a film by Stanley Nelson, which we provided funding for. A lot of American experience projects over the years. We've had a hand in funding Nancy Bursky's The Loving Story. So again, I mean, I think that for us it's about content, and it's about trying to educate people, citizens, although I'll use a phrase that one of my colleagues always says, which is that, but we don't want eat your peas television and film. So, we want to support innovative takes. We want to support, new topics and new ideas. But that said, we can't fund something that advocates one position. So oftentimes, if you come and talk to me about a particular topic, I'll recommend sort of giving multiple stories. So we're often very interested in multiple perspectives on things. And again, as a way of educating.
That's really interesting. One other, I'm going to open up to questions because I'm realizing time's barreling ahead because I'm sure many of you do have questions. But once you've actually you've written a check, given the grant, you've done what you need to do, the filmmakers, do you have expectations or do filmmakers have to sort of get a broadcast, or do they need to have a theatrical? Do you expect that? Can you talk a little bit about that, Lisa?
I mean, we want to know. We want the film to progress in whatever way, but our only requirement is, when you do the application, you say, how are you going to use the grant? And you say, I'm going to, have a chance to look at some of the footage I have, do a couple more shoots, and edit a fundraising reel. Let's just say that's what you said. So that'll be your deliverable for us. And that's what we ask for.
Right.
We certainly, then... want the film to be have the best distribution it can, but that's not something we require. We also don't ask. We do ask, why tell this story? Why tell it now? Why you? And we do want to know what sort of questions or sub issues or ideas it's raising. But we don't ask you to put together any kind of outreach or impact plan in the application. So we're not requiring that as an aspect of the.
Do you have an impact engagement plan, or?
Well, only if you want to submit one. I mean, like Lisa, we don't. We have very few requirements, but if for us, and when we fund something, it is all about audience. So our goal is to work with you to connect your film to as big of an audience as possible. So absolutely, we want our films to play at film festivals, and absolutely, we want theatrical, and absolutely, we want broadcast around the world, and then end up on Fandor.
There you go.
So yes, we're not funding art for art's sake, although that's very nice, but we're actually funding films that can be seen by people to entertain them and engage with them and educate them.
I'm going to open up to questions, and there's a hand waving to the left over here. So there's actually a microphone on that side of the room. So come on down and ask your questions.
First of all, thank you so much. You guys are just awesome. The information you're sharing is really great and helpful. I have a question for Kristen.
Yes.
And then I have a question for the rest of you. The question about crowdfunding is this. I've heard that Kickstarter execs, I'll call them, say that you don't really have to have a well-polished pitch video to start your campaign. And I wanted to know, if you agree with that, and if you have any additional insight you would add.
Yeah, it's true. You don't have to, have any crazy bells and whistles in your pitch video. It really just has to be 1 to 3 minutes of the filmmaker being genuine. I mean, that's what really comes across best in terms of people watching it. As filmmakers, though, you want it to have it look as,
right.
High production value as possible. You don't have to have crazy special effects or anything, but just have it look good, give a little, production value. Maybe you're walking down a New York City street, or, give it some color as opposed to a white wall.
Okay, thank you for that.
No problem.
And to Ryan, Lisa, and
Chrissy.
So I've been working on a treatment for a film, and I've been following a template that's probably comes from ITVS, because I got it from a friend who is a filmmaker. And my question is, should I pay more attention to the application for a specific fund in terms of trying to flesh out my idea, or do you recommend that I use the treatment process, that writing process, as a way to really pull my ideas together and then go and start applying, if that makes sense?
Well, I think, I don't know, I sort of feel like something in between, because I think that the process is a good one, just to figure out. I mean, there'll be the things that most funders ask for, there's quite a similarity. I mean, there's quite an overlap. So I think to work that out would be a good exercise. But then, of course, but then when you're applying for a particular fund, then to really, think about what they're going for. And so you don't have to custom it. I mean, I guess that's really what you would do anyway. But I think instead of coming up with 5 different treatments, probably come up with your treatment and then customize it. Yeah.
Tweaking, especially, because I think we all probably look at things a little differently. So you want to be sure of what our rules and regulations look like, and assess whether your film is right for us.
And what was your name again?
Natalie Bullock-Brown. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Natalie.
Hi, my name is Heidi Lawson. Thank you guys for all the information you're providing. I'm a first-time director, producer of a documentary, but I've done a narrative film that's in post-production currently. I did apply for TFI and was a finalist for a documentary grant while the project in development. But
what was it called?
Passion Plus Preparation. It was a basketball.
I remember that.
Yeah, I was submitting for that and for the ESPN prize, because it was a character-based documentary. And I'm still shooting, was supposed to be shooting this weekend, but this came up.
I remember that being really, really, really nice footage.
Oh, thank you. That was mostly iPhone footage. It was during research during this weekend, actually last year, where I captured a lot of research footage. And my question is actually for all of you, because I've done crowdsourcing and I'm looking at, now that we're still going on with production, how to go about doing that second time around, of any tips or strategy behind doing the grant process the second time around, or doing the crowdfunding the second time around, that is distinctive from the initial time.
That's a really good question, because about resubmitting.
Yeah, I mean, I think Chrissy touched on it. I think, I think we see people, we do give grants for filmmakers that apply on their first time, but more often than not, filmmakers have submitted to us 2 or even 3 or 4 times before they get a grant. It is all in the timing. For what we want to see that the project has advanced. I think it's tricky when you're kind of in development still without funding, but we do need to see that you have, developed the project further, that you are still invested in the story, that the story is, still playing out, and we would need to see a bit more footage just to show that you've been working on your reel as well.
Was your first crowdfunding campaign for this same project?
Yes.
Okay. Is it for a different phase?
It would be. It was development. Like the teaser I had was more of a narrative format type of teaser.
Okay.
So now I'm looking for including more footage that's been captured since then, and going that route.
Yeah, that's the key, because we do have a lot of filmmakers that do multiple campaigns for the same project to kind of space it out a bit. You do one for development, one during production, and then one for post usually. So it's kind of the same thing. People want to see that you've been making progress on it and that you have something to show for the first campaign. There's obviously a little fear of going back to the well a second time. So you have to really plan for that, spend a good 6 weeks to 2 months kind of making sure you're reaching out to maybe some new press publications or bloggers or someone that might be interested outside your inner circle that you could kind of tap into, and just spend some, that's the biggest mistake that filmmakers make, is they don't spend enough time in the preparation leading to a crowdfunding campaign. They kind of just throw it up there and think people are going to come there. It's a full-time job and you have to work at it, but it's definitely possible that you could do multiple campaigns for the same film.
So people can reapply to Catapult. I would say we probably more often will give a grant not on a second application, but on the first. But that also may change as our trends are in progress. But people can certainly reapply, and we do don't encourage you to just submit the same application again, and to highlight. I actually always ask people to highlight what's new, what's happened since, and I think I'm going to now this time actually have a section on the application that specifically asks that, because that's just really helpful to know what's different this time than last time. What's happened since is just that's crucial for the reapplicant. You don't need to have new footage. We kind of assume that you may or may not have new footage. If you do, that's great, but we want to know what's, have you, let's say the first time around you hadn't, cast all your characters, and that can be maybe a little early for us, even for us. So we want, now we know who our characters are, and they're these great, so we want to know how you've progressed in terms of figuring out the story and the characters and the narrative.
And I would just add, I talked about resubmission. For us, you can resubmit as many times as you would like. We certainly encourage that you look over previous reviewers' comments, but you are not required to, I guess, disclose that you have applied and been turned down for funding before. And we as program officers, when I communicate with the panelist reviewers and during the panel meeting, I am actually prohibited from saying if a project has come to us before, or if I have personally or anyone on our staff has worked with them. So basically, we think about it, we don't want to prejudice their thinking, and we urge our panelists to deal with just what you've submitted in the proposal. So not to try and speculate too much.
That's good to know.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Rob Phillips. I'm working on a first-time documentary project, and I had some questions for you guys about fair use. The film that I'm working on involves looking at sort of the intersection of media and how teachers are perceived. And one of the things that we're trying to accomplish is looking at how sort of media spectacles over the past 50 years in terms of like television, film, et cetera, have shaped the way teachers are viewed, how their performance is viewed. And subsequently, that's going to require us to sample things from television, film, et cetera, et cetera. It's pretty small in terms of the overall purpose of what we're trying to accomplish, but I was just curious about, in terms of getting funding, what I might want to keep in mind as I'm making any sort of proposals. So I don't know if that question makes any sense.
I mean, for the cost of...
Right.
Yeah. Well, certainly it can influence what your budget is, and so it's helpful to... I mean, we can, when you describe the project, we'll know that that's going to be that will be a part of your budget that may not be part of other projects. So it's something you can address, but it's it's certainly something that is not uncommon, for projects. So it just means you might have the budget might be bigger, and it might be that much more challenging to raise the funding. But I don't know if anybody.
Yeah, I'm certainly not an expert on fair use, and I suggest using an free arts lawyer.
Yeah,
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, I guess if you're talking fair use, you're not paying. It's not part of your budget. You're talking about fair use stuff you can just use. So. Yeah, that's a.
Yeah.
Although
you should consult a lawyer.
I was at a panel meeting yesterday when this topic came up. I was just in the audience, and pretty much the bottom line from everyone is make sure you consult a lawyer, because there's a lot of misperceptions about what fair use is and isn't. And the other thing is to give yourself a great deal of time. That can be a really time-consuming process.
If there's a filmmaker or there's a film that you've seen that's used fair use, definitely reach out to them and find out what their experience is. If there's any filmmakers here at Full Frame and there's somebody raising their hand in the audience, so chat to that person. Or
I just wanted to say, look up the documentary filmmaker's statement of best practices.
Oh, okay.
Do you want to say that louder, and I'll repeat it?
Or did you want to repeat what she said?
Yeah, just look up the statement of best practices for fair use for documentary.
Look up the statement of fair use and best practices for documentary films.
Yeah.
There you go. But you still have to go to a lawyer. Okay, we are getting short of time, so maybe one more question.
Hi. Sorry. My name is Wendy White. I'm currently producing a political expose film called Seizing Power. So we're in the process of applying for quite a number of grants and other forms of funding. And we're increasingly seeing that we need to put together fairly in-depth engagement, audience engagement kind of plans and initiatives. And I'd love any kind of guidance you can give on that, like how extensive does it need to be? I mean, it's hard when you're not finished with the film to be gathering partnerships and putting together elaborate plans for audience engagement and for making an impact with your film. So I'd appreciate any guidance you can share about that.
Yeah. Well, this is the one that all of the funders are trying to figure out as well. There was a couple of weeks ago in New York City, we spent a large group of people spent the whole week discussing this and how to kind of properly balance your creative storytelling vision with this other set of work that really is meant for a new producer. There's an impact producer is the new person that we're going to be seeing working on films. And I just have to say that I think increasingly funders are going to be looking more and more at these, even though right now TFI is not only if you have one attached to your film, we're happy to look at it and include it in our review. I would start looking and amassing all sorts of nonprofit potential partners that ambitions that your film, embodies some of the issues within your film, and putting those lists together. I think that we're looking for more of an in-depth kind of answer to this question, not just we want to premiere at Sundance and then go to full frame.
Yeah.
I think that we're looking to see how you're going to connect your film to the audiences and create these and how these audiences are going to then engage or act after they see the film. So there's unfortunately not a black and white issue right now, because I think we're all really trying to figure out what this new kind of part of our industry is. But I think that you should really, because since your film is a political film, it really is. It will help you in the long run if you start thinking about this stuff from the very earliest moment that you can.
Do you know how much depth do they want?
It looks like we're out of time. So, for those people who had questions, definitely come up afterwards. I want to just say thank you so much to our awesome panelists, Chrissy and the gang, and thanks for you guys for coming. Thank you.